Hey friends, it's been a while. Welcome back. My name is Beth. I am the owner of a little company called Salem Haunts. Actually, it's a very little company because it's just me, and hey, I'm little, so I guess it fits. Today we're visiting an area that used to be part of Salem. In fact, it was known as Olde Salem Village back in 1692 during the time of the Salem Witch Trials. Today it is the town of Danvers, probably about 7 miles or so from the center of Salem, Massachusetts. So although it's not visited as often, in fact, I would say maybe hardly visited at all, it has a big punch of history, including what I think is one of the most important sites in the 1692 history of the witch trials. So let's go see what we can find. Here we are at the Salem Witchcraft Trials Memorial in Danvers, Mass. So Danvers, Mass is a town neighboring Salem, but in 1692, Danvers was part of Salem. It was called Olde Salem Village. So if you truly want to visit the sites of the Salem Witch Trials and the witch hysteria that would ensue afterwards, you really need to make a side trip to Danvers too. This memorial, unlike the Salem Witchcraft Memorial, remembers 25 victims, where Salem remembers 20. The difference is that this artist chose to include the names of everyone who died after they were accused of witchcraft, even if they died in prison, including the youngest victim, which would be a child born to Sarah Good named Mercy Good, who would die in these horrific conditions of the dungeon after she was born. So this memorial here will show you a replica of some of the shackles that may have been used against these poor innocent victims. It shows you the names of those victims, some of the final words, and also from this angle you can get a representation of the judges, the magistrates, with the Book of Life, right, condemning these poor people to death. And this memorial will serve as the remembrance of, unfortunately, this horrific event that happened in Salem, New Salem Town, and Olde Salem Village in 1692. So the crossroads of Center and Hobart are where you'll find a lot of information about the witchcraft trials of 1692 in this area over here that we're walking through, which was known back then as Olde Salem Village. Right next to the Danvers Witch Trial Memorials is the sign that will tell you that the original Salem Village meeting house would have been located in the same area. It would be directly across the street from where this memorial stands now. So it would have been somewhere in this location. Long since gone, because a lot of these original buildings that were used during the witchcraft trials as official meeting places, places of interrogation, places of trials, were pretty much left to rot and decay afterwards. It's not like you wanted to have these remembrances of this, what they thought later would be a great mistake when Satan or the devil had actually come to Salem to deceive us into believing that innocent people were guilty. So even when those who would later have remorse about what happened to the witchcraft trials and the 20 people that would be executed during that time, they still blamed it on the devil. Basically that the devil deluded us into killing innocent people in his name. So accountability, responsibility, they would take some, but ultimately they would still place it on the devil. This building over here is called Danvers Ordinary. So this is the building that would be used to do the examinations of some of the victims after they were accused of being witches. So if you were to say you were innocent of being a witch, they would bring you to a place like this. It was called an ordinary back then, and the whole community could come if they chose to, and just be patient, King. We're talking about some serious stuff here. The whole community could actually come and witness it, and what they would do is these investigations of your body to see if you had something that was called a witch's teat. Witch's teat could be anything, not what you think, but it could be a birthmark, it could be a skin tag, it could be any sort of deformity on your skin that would prove that that's where your familiar fed at night to get its strength to bewitch people on your behalf. And those investigations, very sadly, would have happened in this building. This sign here will tell you that we used to stand in this on this lot, not the current day church that's here now, but it was a church in Salem Village where after the witchcraft trials, Reverend Greene, who was just a young man of 22, would actually seat the accusers next to the accused families to try to reconcile the community, because there had been a gag order placed on Salem by Governor Phipps, which made it illegal to talk or spread any news or information about what had happened in Salem. Again, they had kind of blamed it all on the devil. The devil had deluded them. They did not want to spread word of what had happened and all of these innocent people who were executed. So Reverend Greene did the best he could to try to bring the community back together, and he would have done it on this land. Pretty brave for someone aged 22, a task to take on. So here we are, walking with the king, Rebel the Ghost Hunter, to visit the Samuel Parris archaeological site, which is the actual foundation of the house where the first two girls, Betty and Abigail, went into the fits and were diagnosed as being bewitched. Easy to miss. Whoops. See, I almost missed it. The only thing that will tell you that you're here is this tiny little sign, which is usually overrun by these bushes, in between two houses in the middle of a residential neighborhood with no parking. So King, let us explore and see what we find down here. Ooh! This was actually an animal cart path that would have been used in the old days. And it must be odd to be the neighbor of a site that has such a sad history. I've had some sad neighbors too, but that's another story in a very different way. See, King is a ghost detector. He's sensing something's going on here, man. Something's going on. You would not be incorrect, King. So walking down this little cart path, right, and you get a little chicken shed over here on the right. You get some chickens and hens, apparently. Maybe aren't too spooked by having the remnants of the witchcraft hysteria in their backyard. Hello, chickas. And then you come into this opening where you will see, start to see some signs that will tell you maybe you are someplace. So this is actually an archaeological site, and you can see why it's hard for people to find. You can see why halfway down here you might say, am I actually walking in someone's yard? Maybe I should back out. But if you wait long enough, dun dun dun, here it is. This is the archaeological dig site where they found the actual basement of Reverend Parris's house, where the first two girls were diagnosed as being bewitched. Gives you a really good idea also of how small these houses were. Look at the footprint of this building, very, very small. And you would be having, in some of these cases, upwards to 10 people living in these tiny little lots. So let's take a look at this sign that will tell you that this was the Salem Village parsonage. This was the building where, during 1692, Reverend Parris would be living when his daughter Betty and his niece Abigail came down with a mysterious illness. They would be diagnosed by the doctor, Dr. Griggs, as being under an evil hand. So were these two girls faking? Were they actually sick? To tell you the truth, I lean towards the fact that they were likely ill, misdiagnosed, and then when other girls saw the attention they were getting as being sort of diagnosed as being bewitched, they sort of jumped in and it became a whole different story. This building also would have been the home of Reverend George Burroughs, who would become one of the innocent people accused of witchcraft during the hysteria. George Burroughs was a former minister. He had some issues with Salem over some debt that he owed. Couldn't pay that debt because the city of Salem was not paying him. So what would happen is eventually he would go up to Maine and start practicing up there. They would drag him back from Maine under the charge of being the king of the witches, the leader of all of it. He would say the Our Father perfectly before he would be executed. The witnesses allegedly would say, wait, don't hang him. You said a witch can't say the Our Father perfectly. And he just did. He would be hung anyway with the explanation that the devil was whispering the words in his ears. Very, very sad. So let's step in, because you actually can enter the basement of this building. And yes, of course, the building's gone. But if you believe in energy like I do, The energy is still here. So look how small this is. I am standing in the center, and I feel pretty claustrophobic right now. This is the foundation that would have outlined the size of this house, which would have been 2 stories that stood in this spot. And pretty cool for anyone, right, interested in the witch hysteria. You must come down here and stand in ground zero where the first 2 girls were diagnosed as being under an evil hand. This is it. King is sensing something. King, the ghost hunter. So I find this interesting, that this sign would say that it was in this house that Tituba, Reverend Parris's slave, told the girls of the household stories of witchcraft which nurtured the hysteria. Actually believe that that is not true. Modern historians start to believe that she was sort of a scapegoat, and this idea of her putting all these stories in these kids' heads, doing these spells, dancing around at midnight with chicken blood all over them like you see in the Crucible movie, that maybe that wasn't true. Maybe she was just a young girl from the West Indies who was a caretaker of these girls. Wrong place, wrong time, became the scapegoat to take the blame for being the one hurting these girls because Reverend Parris was so humiliated that this outbreak would start in his house. Maybe. So I do think it's interesting that there is almost a theory about why it may have happened here, when in fact we actually don't know exactly what happened, and we'll never know what happened. Another place you may want to visit in Danvers is this building we're standing in front of now, that was formerly known as the Danvers Lunatic Asylum, the Danvers Mental Health Hospital, Danvers State Hospital. A lot of names this building went by. Historically is one of the most gruesome tales of torture and disrespect and mistreatment of patients in America. If you are a fan of American Horror Story and you saw the episodes called Asylum, it was inspired by this building over here. If you've seen the movie Session 9 with David Caruso, it was filmed in this building before it was converted from an insane asylum to luxury condos. Because who doesn't want to pay top dollar to live in one of the most haunted sites in America? So naturally we're touring during the day that they're doing lawn and garden work here, so I apologize for the background noise. But I beg to differ with that sign that says this place was all about natural light and healing, because when you walked through these doors, or when you were brought through these doors, maybe even dragged through these doors, it was the beginning of what would likely be a living hell. Shout out to my husband Doug, who found the cemetery I've been looking at for ages down this little path off the street. Been looking for this for a while. A lot of people buried here in unmarked graves, unfortunately. My son is on the hunt too. Let's see what we find in here. So in the center of this burial ground is this memorial to former patients of Danvers State Hospital. They say, "With love, we remember your names." Look at how many names of patients are buried in this space. And then look at how few actual headstones there are. Almost none, and just a few numbered markers. What do you think, King? Thanks for finding this spot with Daddy. So can you imagine what would become of your life that you would be dumped in a place like Danvers Lunatic Asylum, and then at the end of the day you would be remembered as a number? Your identity is so small that your resting place is just a number. Not too far away from those other sites, you can actually visit the home of Rebecca Nurse, probably one of the more famous victims of the witchcraft trials. She would be hanged after she was found innocent, and then that verdict sadly would be turned around later. Probably one of the most beloved community members that would be executed during this time. I would love to show you her house, the family burial ground on here, but I'm going to respect this sign, right? As a historical guide, I feel I need to respect the rules, and there is no walking the property when it's closed. But on this land, you would be able to see today's version of the Rebecca Nurse homestead, which would have undergone some restoration and repairs, renovations over the years, as well as a family burial ground in the back, which has possibly the remains of Rebecca Nurse, although we'll never know for sure. They believe that possibly she was reburied in this burial ground in an unmarked grave. So thank you for exploring Danvers with me today, known as Olde Salem Village in 1692. Hope you enjoyed our walk. And remember, if you ever come to visit Salem, rent a car. Leave a little extra time to see such an important part of Salem, which was Olde Salem Village. Take care. See you soon. Bye.